I did not sleep after I read Ellen Voss's file. I sat with the photograph until morning, and then I put it face down on the workbench because I could not look at it anymore. I put it face down. And then, 20 minutes later, I looked over and it was face up again. I told myself I did it, that my hands had moved without me noticing. That is the kind of thing that happens when you have not slept. I turned it face down again. I made a cup of coffee. When I came back, it was face up. I do not know how many times I turned that photograph over that morning. I stopped counting after 4. I left it face up in the end because it seemed easier. There are 3 folders in the box with Machen's name on them. I said last time that I could not avoid them anymore. That is still true. But there is a difference between knowing you have to do something and being ready to do it. I sat with the box for 2 days before I could pick one up. The first Machen folder is the thickest one, heavier than the others. Not just paper, something else in there. I felt it as soon as I lifted it. It is not a case file. The other files in this box are reports, written for someone else. Filed for a purpose, even if that purpose was to be hidden. This is different. The pages are not typed. They are handwritten, some in pencil, some in blue ink, some in black. The paper is different weights. Notebook paper, legal pad, the back of a Park Service memo, scraps torn from bigger sheets. It is a journal, Machen's journal. Kept in secret, from 1979 through most of 1980, the year after Ellen Voss disappeared. The first entry is dated January 4th, 1979, 2 months after Ellen disappeared. They have moved me to a desk in the district office. I sign forms. I answer telephones. I am supposed to be forgetting. I am not forgetting. On my day off, I drive up to her station. The road is snowed in past the fork. I park where I can, and I walk the rest. There is a padlock on her door now. I stood outside for an hour. I do not know what I was waiting for. I keep her boots in my truck. I know I should not have taken them, but nobody else was going to. They were going to throw them away. He kept her boots. I read that line 4 times. He drove to her station on his day off in the snow, and he stood outside a padlocked door, and he kept her boots in his truck because nobody else was going to. I understand that. I understand it in a way I should not, because I never met her, but I understand it. The next few entries are short, dates, a few lines each. He is going up to her station every week, sometimes twice. He is not searching, he is just going, standing outside, walking the perimeter, sitting on the porch of her station in the cold. Grief has its own rituals. I know that too. Then, in mid-February, the entries change. February 18th. I walked to the ridge today. I told myself I was not going. I have told myself that every day this month. I went anyway. The cave entrance is exactly where the search team logged it, 1 mile north of her station. Overgrown now. The scuff marks are still there. Nobody has been back since. Nobody looked. I stood at the mouth for a long time. The air moves out of it in a steady current, even in February, even under snow. It is warmer than the air outside. I did not know that. I have been reading these files for years, and I never knew that. It smells like a forest floor in autumn, sweet, deeper than sweet. I stayed longer than I meant to. I put the journal down when I read that. The smell, the airflow warmer than the outside, standing longer than you meant to. He is describing the exact thing I described from Marble Fork, word for word almost, except he was writing this 45 years before I was born to think it. Something in my chest went cold when I read it. Not fear exactly, recognition. Like when you hear a song you have not heard since you were a child, and your body remembers it before your mind does. I have not been to that cave. I have been to a different one, 500 miles away. But I know what Machen is describing, because I felt it too. And the file says his cave is 1 mile from a station in the same district as the one I worked on in 1996. I picked the journal back up. February 22nd. I went inside today. I told myself I would only go to the first bend. I brought a flashlight and a length of paracord tied to a tree at the entrance. Standard practice. The passage is wider than I expected. Limestone shelf overhead, sloping down. The floor is dry. At the first bend, I could still see daylight behind me. That is when I saw the wall. There is something growing on it. Dark, fibrous. In patches at first, then thicker as you go in. It is not lichen. Lichen does not grow this deep. It is not algae. There is no water. I do not know what it is. I scraped some into a specimen bag. The limestone beneath it has grooves in it. The substance is dissolving the rock. The smell is stronger inside. Not overpowering, just present. Like being in a room that has been closed up for years and something in the walls has been waiting. I only went as far as the first bend. I could have gone further. I wanted to. The dark, fibrous growth, dissolving the limestone. The smell. Everything the geologist at Marble Fork described in 1951. Everything I smelled last month. Machen is looking at the same thing in 1979 and calling it by no name because it does not have one. And he wanted to go further. He wrote that. He wanted to. I know that feeling too. I felt it at Marble Fork. The pull. The part of you that wants to keep going, even when the reasonable part is saying stop. I am beginning to think Machen was already infected before he ever went into that cave. The next entries get longer. Machen goes back to the cave once a week, then twice, then more. He starts writing about what he sees down there. March 3rd. I made it to what I am calling the second chamber, roughly 80 feet in. The passage opens into a small dome. The growth on the walls is continuous now. In some places, it forms strands stretched between the rock, like something is spinning it. I sat down in the second chamber, and I turned the flashlight off. I do not know why. I sat in the dark for a long time. It was not silent. There is a sound down there, not loud, below hearing. You feel it in your ribs before you notice it, like a pulse in a very large room. I do not know if it comes from the walls or from the passage further down. I do not know if it is real or if it is my own heartbeat coming back to me strangely. I want to think it is my heartbeat. I do not think it is my heartbeat. I stopped reading here and I sat still, because I have felt that pressure I described after Marble Fork, the awareness of something underneath. I called it hearing it breathing. Machen calls it a pulse. Same thing, different words, 45 years apart. I kept reading. March 17th. I went past the second chamber today. There is a third. The passage narrows and drops. I had to crawl a section. When I stood up on the other side, there was more space, more growth. I did not measure my depth. I did not want to write it down. I found something in the third chamber. A boot. Left. Woman's. Size 7.5. He does not write anything else in that entry. The next entry is dated a week later, and it is not about the cave. March 24th. I have not been sleeping. I keep waking up in my truck. The engine is not running, but the keys are in the ignition. I do not remember getting up. I do not remember driving out of my apartment complex. I have woken up in the parking lot at the base of the fire road 3 times this week. The fire road that leads to her station. I need to write this down, because if I do not tell someone, I am going to think I am losing my mind. Maybe I already am. He is describing what has been happening to me. Waking up somewhere else, not remembering the drive, ending up at a place connected to the caves. I have been doing that too. I described it to you 2 episodes ago. My back door, my driveway, my hands trying to steer toward a canyon in California I had no reason to know about. He was already like this in March of 1979, 4 months after Ellen disappeared. He had only just found the growth on the walls. He had barely started going in, and already his body was moving without him. I have been telling myself the infection, or whatever it is, started for me at Marble Fork, that standing at the crack was the first exposure that mattered. That is why I lost time. That is why the pull got stronger. But Machen was already like this before he had gone deep, which means the exposure started earlier for him, earlier than the cave, earlier than the growth. I need to think about when mine really started. It started in 1996, when I found the box that came out of a hidden concrete room, in a station in the same district as these caves, a station that was abandoned around the time Ellen disappeared. Whatever is on those pages, whatever is inside that box, I have had it in my garage for 29 years. I want to describe something that happened while I was reading the March entries. I have been sitting with it for 2 days, and I still do not know how to say it. I was reading Machen's entry about the second chamber, the one where he sits in the dark and feels the pulse. I was picturing it, trying to picture it, and for a second, a very short second, I did not have to picture it. I remembered it. Not as a scene from a film, not the way you remember a book. I remembered the cold on the back of my neck, the weight of my head against the rock, the taste in my mouth from the air. I remembered turning the flashlight off, and I remembered the way the darkness felt heavier than the dark of a room with the lights off. Then it was gone, and I was in my garage holding a piece of notebook paper from 1979. I have never been in that cave. I have never sat in the dark 80 feet underground. I have never turned off a flashlight and listened for the pulse of the walls. But for 1 second, I remember doing it. I do not have an explanation, and I am not going to try to invent one. I am going to write it down and move on. There was another moment like that later. I was reading the entry about the boot in the 3rd chamber, size 7.5, and I had a picture in my head, very sharp, of Ellen Voss sitting on a porch pulling a boot on. Left foot, same size, woven laces. She looked up and said something. I could not hear what she said. I never knew Ellen Voss. I had never heard her name until last week. But my head made a picture of her tying her boots on a porch and looking up at me. I am going to keep reading. The entries continue through spring and into summer. Machen is going deeper. He describes a 4th chamber, a 5th. He starts writing about how he feels underground. Calm, he says, not scared. He writes that he feels closer to her down there than he does in the office or at home. He starts writing about seeing her. June 12th, I saw her at the fourth bend. Not really. I know it was not really. But my light caught something at the edge of the passage, and for a moment, my whole body knew it was her. It was a shadow on rock. I know. But for that 1 second, I was certain. I do not think the growth is dangerous the way I first thought. I do not think it wants to hurt anyone. I think it shows us the people we are looking for. That is what it does. That is why they walk in. That is when it hit me. Machen thinks the growth is showing him Ellen. He thinks he is finding her down there. But nobody is down there. Ellen has been dead, or as good as dead, since November of the year before. The growth is not showing him Ellen. It is showing him what he wants, what he is missing. It is making him want to go deeper. The people in these files did not walk into the caves for no reason. They walked in because something was down there for them. A voice, a shape, a person they had lost. It is not calling to people randomly. It is finding the thing inside them that hurts most, and it is using it as bait. Machen was infected long before he ever went into that cave. He was infected the moment Ellen went missing. Because the thing in the caves does not need spores to find you. It just needs to know what you have lost. And now it knows what I have lost.